am proud, even with the Don. Sometimes I sit back here and one more time.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll call to order the April 8th, 2010 preliminary budget workshop of the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida. At this time, I'd like to invite Stan Bowling, the Planning Director, to come down and lead us in the invocation, and Vice Chairman Commissioner Slaughter will lead us in the pledge. Everyone, please rise. Good morning, Stan.
Good morning. Let's pray. Lord God, this morning we meet in your name, and we just really want to thank you for the gift of life you've given each of us this morning. We do not take that for granted. And we thank you for your provision in the past. And we ask you this morning, do you see the size of our doubts? Do you see that we have only the faith of a mustard seed? What can you do with that? It looks like we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. We ask for your wisdom. Give us this day our daily bread. Give our leaders the wisdom they need today to accomplish your purposes tomorrow. We ask for this wisdom in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So he knows that he wasted 2 hours of quality time just because he had an accident.
Thank you. And we'll get right into this, and we'll go ahead. And Joe, are you going to lead off, or Jason?
Yeah, so what we're going to have Jason do a PowerPoint on the preliminary budget, we'd like to go through that and then ask for policy direction from the Commission on what we need to accomplish and what you'd like as far as our goals.
Okay, great. Morning, Jason.
Morning, Commissioner O'Brien. For the record, Jason Brown, County Budget Director. I'm going to start off today going over a little bit of history of where we've been, where things are today, what we're doing right now, and where we're going in the future, what our cuts need to be, and what our strategies for accomplishing those cuts will be. If you look, the county has been going through these cuts for a number of years, just like our private citizens. The economy's been down for several years now. We've been trying to make adjustments. In the last 3 years, the board has made some hard choices. We've gotten a lot of cooperation from agencies that we fund, our own departments, and finally, where the buck stops, the board has made some difficult decisions and getting us to where we need to be. Over that time, we have cut a total of 162 full-time positions. That is down about 17% from where we were in 06-07. The constitutional officers are down about 16, about 2%. This process started in 2007-2008. Our tax roll was actually still slightly going up, even though obviously the real estate market had turned at that time because the lagging nature of the tax roll. However, there were legislative rollbacks. We were required to, based on a bill from the legislature, to meet 5% below the rollback rate that year. So even though the tax roll was still going up a little bit, we cut the budget, and we're down just a little under $1 million in property taxes that year. The following year, we had Amendment 1, which was a little under 5% reduction in the tax roll due to the additional homestead exemption, $25,000 homestead exemption, and the market value started to go down a little bit in addition to that. And then last year, we had about a 10% tax roll reduction as the tax roll is catching up with the market. So we were down about $9.7 million that year. So if you look over the last 3 years, we've been down about $15.2 million. As a note, our other revenues obviously have been falling during that time. The $10 million reduction in property taxes for the year that we're in accompanied a total decrease of $23 million in the taxing fund budgets. We went from $175 million to about $151 million in the taxing fund budgets for this year. And all the while the tax roll was down that 15% and change over that time, our millage rates went down. During the good years, we lowered the millage rates by about 30% across the board as the tax roll went up, and then as the tax roll has been going back down, we have held the line on the tax rates so far, not increasing the tax rates. And all this has been done by largely doing more with less. We have had some minimal service level impacts, but nothing on the order of a large magnitude. We've had no fee increases. You'll hear around the state of other governments increasing user fees all over the place as kind of another way to raise revenue. We haven't resorted to that. For example, one of our biggest is the landfill rates, the SWID rates that all residents and commercial property pays for the operation of the landfill, the curbside pickup, and the curbside recycling. That's down about 14% since 05-06. And for the year that we're in, we had some good cooperation from the Teamsters. They were in the second year of a 3-year contract that allowed them to negotiate for a COLA and provided them with merit increases. They waived the COLA and also waived their merit increases. The same thing was done to the non-union. The IAFF, they had the same opportunity. They waived their COLA. They did keep their merit increases, but waived their COLA. We made some health plan adjustments, increases in copays, things like that, to keep up with the rising cost of health insurance, and actually look for a reduction that saved us about $500,000. We've been doing those energy conservation measures with FPL, replacing light bulbs, making changes to the HVAC systems, saved about $176,000 this year. Over the last 3 years, we've cut travel by almost 2/3, travel expenses. Last year, we went through an RFP for our property insurance coverage. We wanted to make sure that we were keeping the broker competitive, and by going through that process, we saved about $1.1 million. Our premiums last year were a little over $3 million. They went to $2 million for the year we're in. Some of that was probably just market adjustment as we went another year without a hurricane. We also made some adjustments to the program that we had that saved about $300,000. So about $300,000 of that was a plan adjustment, was a program adjustment. The other $800,000 was competitive and also market rates going down. Overtime's down about 30% since 06-07. We also funded our OPEB expense, which is the retiree health insurance cost. That was a new expense, a new accounting requirement during this time. That was implemented 08-09.
And we're also looking at capping that. We're going to be coming back in a few weeks because we don't think you can continue to fund it. So we'll be coming back with the commission and requesting they cap at a dollar amount to limit our future liabilities. So I just want to make you aware of that, and that'll help us in the long run.
Okay.
Also, last year we made the change in recycling from a 7-sort to a 2-sort, and what that did was opened up new recyclables, your steel cans, cardboard, magazines, things like that, and it also produced a savings because there's not time at the curbside sorting that. That was about a 22.7% savings, or $300,000 for the SWID district, and allowed us to reduce the SWID rates by about 5% that year. Here we are, just a historical comparison of our positions. In blue, you've got the total number of full-time positions for BCC departments. In red, you've got the constitutional officers. If you look at I want to focus on the BCC departments here. As I mentioned before, we're down 162 full-time positions. That brings us back to staffing levels lower than they were in 2000-2001, where we are today here. Since that time, we've opened a 30,000 square foot library, a 12th fire station, 2 county pools, North County Park ball fields. So we're providing more services than we were in 2000-2001 with fewer employees.
Also, the population, I think, was around 103,000. It's now 143,000. So you've seen considerable, as far as employees per capita, is a huge reduction.
And you see that on this next slide, borne out that we were bumping around 7 employees per 1,000 residents, and this is a common barometer to use in staffing various services and overall. So we were about 7 employees per 1,000, roughly, from pretty constant over the years. But since 05-06, we've dropped that down to 5.5 employees per 1,000 on the BCC department. So we've been making some structural changes to get leaner and provide similar and even more services with the new employees. This next slide is the county unemployment rates, just as an illustration of where our economy is, and part of the reason I think the board's given the direction to hold the line on the taxes, to keep the burden off of the people that pay the taxes to support our operations, and obviously they're hurting as the unemployment rate's 14.3% versus 11.6% last year, and back in 07 and 08 that was more like 5-6%. So obviously some difficult times in the economy. That's no news to anybody, but just a little graphic illustration of it there. Where are we right now? This year we're having a little bit of a difficult year. That's why you've heard we're looking at, as Joe was mentioning, we're looking at some mid-year cuts, and here's a little bit of the reason why. Our revenues are down maybe a little more than we thought, and our expenses are down not enough to accommodate that. If you look at the general fund here, this is a comparison of where we are at the end of March, at the end of last month, this year versus last year. So that's a halfway point in the budget. So if you look,
and this is a big concern to us, and that's why, if you'll take a look, we're going to have to do a mid-year adjustment unless we lose money this year, and I don't. And if we lose money this year, it compounds next year. So you will see a mid-year adjustment. I'll be doing one internally, and one of the questions that we're going to have for the commission: do we send letters to outside agencies asking them to do a mid-year adjustment? Because we're halfway through the year, and do a little bit of their part. You cannot all take it out of our back anymore, because if you'll look in the general fund, we are a minority in our own budget now, and that's scary, because we've cut and cut. We haven't cut outside agencies as much, and we haven't cut. If you look at it, we're 22% of our general fund.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Wheeler.
Joe asked a question, and as far as I'm concerned, everybody should be aware of the situation. They should be requested to look at the mid-year adjustment if we're doing one, and as you said, it only compounds next year if we don't, so they need to have a heads up and notice.
Yeah, and some agencies we have not cut at all, while other agencies have cooperated and cut every year, and I think we should be easier on them.
Thank you. You can see here our revenues year to date are down about $2.3 million from last year. Expenses are down about $1.5 million, so our net is about $1.8 million to the negative. Now, we did have a pretty good year last year. We ran a slight surplus last year, but we're definitely running behind last year. Look at the MSTU fund. Same thing's going on. $2 million down in revenue, $800,000 in expenses so far, for a net loss of about $1.5 million year to date. Transportation fund, we're down about $700,000 in total. Emergency Services District down about $2.4 million. If you look in total between the four taxing funds, that's about $6.5 million down. So that's a major reason for concern for us.
Jason, that was compared to last year. How are we doing compared to budget?
Compared to the budget, we are okay. What's happening is our expenses are still running a little bit under the budget, but our revenues are probably running below the budget by a little bit. And we typically under-expend our budget and most of the time conservatively estimate revenues, and a lot of times the actual revenues will be a little more than the budget, but we're not seeing that this year, and that's one of the...
Yeah, well, it's usually on the expense side, which we're not seeing. If you look, we usually make our savings on the expense side. We're not doing that this year. We're just that close, and that is a concern. Number one, in the taxing lines, legally we can't go over budget. And secondly, what we see is that we don't see our expenses going down going into the end of the year unless we make cuts, which I will be doing in my department, in the departments, and it's that close, and we're very concerned about it.
And we've always underrun our budget on expenses, and we do that a lot of government agencies seem to fall into the trap of the departments thinking they have to spend their whole budget or they won't justify their budget next year. We try and make that not an environment so that there's all this year-end spending that's not necessarily. So we're usually a little bit under our budget on expenses, as Joe said, and that provides us a savings. This year, it's just the budgets are so tight. Some things have gone against us, like fuel prices have gone way up from where they were last year,
And you know, we expect our own departments to absorb that and make the cuts, and we don't do that to outsiders, and that's something to keep in mind.
Right, well, they have to make do. The current year, county's response, the budget that we're in, eliminated about 39 full-time positions for a savings of about $2.4 million. Made those health plan changes, the Teamsters and the non-union, foregoing the raises. That was almost a $1.1 million savings. We've continued the hiring freeze, which we've had in place since May of 2007. That currently has us at about 16 vacant full-time positions. The problem there is we used to get more vacancies a couple of years ago, but now there are fewer people with opportunities to go elsewhere. So whereas that generated more positions for us in the past, it's generating relatively fewer, but we're still taking advantage of it. We're prioritizing the county services and looking at the needs versus nice to have, and looking at where we can make some mid-year cuts this year, as Joe had talked about. The energy conservation measures, we've gone into a new phase of that. In addition to the $176,000 that was estimated in the budget when it was approved, that next phase is a savings of about $104,000. The board approved about a month and a half ago a change in our telephone service that saved about $95,000 countywide. What do we think we're looking at for next year? What size is the hole we're in? Talked to the property appraiser. Obviously, he's still working on the tax roll. He has till July 1st to finalize that, so don't want to put him in too bad of a position. But he's saying about between 10 and 20% down. He's seeing just values down about 20%, and the taxable is less than that. But he's not sure exactly where the taxable will come in because you've got the difference with the homestead that makes the just value different than the taxable value change. The state Department of Revenue does a revenue estimating conference primarily for the schools, but they now have a number for the counties as those numbers are different. It's about a 10.1% decrease statewide. They've got us at about 10.8%, I think, last I saw. So what we're planning for, based on conversations with the property appraiser, is about a 12% decline in the tax roll. What that will mean for us is a loss of $10.6 million in the taxing funds. If on the worst case scenario, 20% decline would be $17.6 million. Hopefully, we're not facing that. But also, we have the other revenues declining. Half-cent sales tax, I'm projecting to be down about 4% next year at this time. That's following decreases of 10% this year, 5% the year before, 14% the year before that, and I think about 3 or 4% the year before that. So we're headed to our 5th straight year of decline in half-cent
sales tax is an indicator usually of how your local economy is doing. And the governor had said that he thought that the state of Florida was going to have an increase in the revenues this year. We're not seeing that here locally, because if our revenues and half-cent sales tax are down 4% from last year, that's a definite decline in our local economy. So this is a real barometer as to how locally businesses are doing, and it tells us that things are very tight out there, and revenues are dropping.
Other revenues going down too. State revenue sharing, I'm just estimating 10% down on that because it's kind of a black box. We get what the state tells us we'll get, so we'll find that out in June. I'm just estimating down 10% right now. Our interest earnings are down 20%. I have there in the general fund, but pretty much across the board, we're seeing about a 20-25% decrease, and that's lower interest rates out there. We invest in the safest possible securities, U.S. Treasuries, U.S. agencies. They've been seen as a safe harbor during these times, and the yields are very, very low right now.
And if you look at interest earnings, if you start to erode your fund balance, that number gets bigger because you've got less money invested. So when we talk about it, when people say, why don't you erode your fund balance, you have to take into account that your interest income will also drop considerably.
Right, and we always use that interest earnings to offset the tax rate. State aid to libraries, has been some talk about eliminating that. The last we've heard is the Senate bill has replaced some funding there. There's a difference between the House and Senate bill as far as I know right now. The House bill would result in basically zero, but the Senate bill would probably result in about $80,000 for us, down from a little over $100,000 this year. So that may be a smaller decrease than we anticipated. However, I can tell you when I started here 13 years ago, we were getting close to $300,000 a year from that program. So that's just a revenue that goes down year after year, seemingly. Our gas taxes are down a little bit, not as much as the sales tax in some cases. ALS charges, the bills for transporting people to the hospital. That's one rare revenue that's actually going up about 4%. Our impact fees are down. We're estimating about 85% from last year, and I'll point out that last year's total was down 95% from the peak. So that's 85% down from 95% down, which is really saying something. Golf courses behind. Golf courses have actually been weathering the storm pretty well. This year they're having a little bit more of a struggle. Down 8.1%. It does support itself. We've not supplemented that with tax funds. We anticipate it will still support.
Any
itself.
idea why? I mean,
It's two things. One is the economy. Golf has been on a decline of nationally of 3% a year, but the weather was a big issue for us this year. The rain and the peak season. When you get a rain day, it's $22,000. If you get a rain day in the summer, it's a $3,000 loss in revenue. So we had a lot more rain days, rain outs, and cold weather.
Freezing weather.
Yeah, so that people didn't come out and golf like they usually do. Also, when we're talking about this, we're talking about our operating shortfall. Our capital shortfall is even worse. We're just simply going to not do projects we were going to do. And I just want everyone to know that the capital situation is even worse than our operating.
okay.
Right. Building department's down about 15% from last year, and that's obviously way down from the height. We have dropped from 52 employees at the high point a couple years ago to 17 today, so staffing's down by a little over 2/3 in that department so far. Here's just a graphic of what the tax roll deductions would mean at different assumptions. Right now I'm using 12%. We're using 12% as our base assumption. That's $10.5 million total, about $10.6 million. Outside of the bond funds, it's $9.8 million, and I have that subtotal because we kind of have to adjust the bond funds for what's needed to pay the debt service. 10% would be $8.2 million without the bonds, but 20% would be a little over $16 million. As this table shows the total loss, so if you take the 12% scenario from the last slide, that was about $9.9 million in total ad valorem. We've got other revenues going down for a total of about $4.5 million. So our total cut that we're estimating for the taxing funds is $14.4 million to meet the tax roll decline this year. And then what you see down at the very bottom is the kind of the cut percentage, the final answer there. With a 12% tax roll decline, for example, the general fund, we need to cut 9.9%. It's a little less than the 12% because our other revenues aren't falling by as much. MSTU fund is 7.7%. It's the least dependent on the taxes. They only fund about a third of the budget versus 2/3 for the general fund and about 90% for the emergency services district. Transportation fund, that's supported by the general fund and MSTU fund and gas taxes. We're estimating 10% there, and emergency services district's the most dependent on property taxes, so that's an 11.4% estimated cut. Going to focus on the general fund for a little bit here and just talk about what makes up the general fund. Joe's alluded to the fact that we're a minority. The BCC departments are a minority in the general fund. You can see here the constitutional officers represent 62%, state agencies 3%, nonprofits 4%, children's services, which is an extension of nonprofits, is 1%. Reserves of 8%, and the BCC departments are 22%. So the BCC departments are really less than a quarter of the total general fund budget. and they have been a shrinking portion of that as the cuts on those areas have been more than the others. This is kind of a discussion of what does the BCC have control over? The BCC and the county gets responsibility for the entire tax bill. However, the board knows this pretty well. I think in an effort to point out to the public, there are things that are not fully in the county's control. The first thing is state mandates. There are certain things we have to fund. Medicaid, a certain portion of Medicaid. Department of Juvenile Justice, a new unfunded mandate a couple of years ago. We get a bill and we pay it. And then there are other things we have to provide facilities for the constitutional officers, the court system, the health department, various state agencies.
If a state agency, if they talk about decentralizing up in Tallahassee and bringing it to local level, that means they send them to our county and we give them space, have to pay their phone bill, their utilities. It's a requirement. People don't realize that we pay for all state agencies, all their building costs, all their telephone costs, all their electric costs, and that's a huge number.
Constitutional officers, there's various different statutes governing the various different constitutional officers. The board has certain powers to cut the budget. However, some constitutional officers' budgets are approved by the Department of Revenue. Others can appeal to the governor if they're not happy with the cuts. Next is state agencies. We have to fund the court system, state attorney.
Also, in the constitutional officers, once we approve the budget in July and we recognize we have a shortfall like we're in now, the statutes don't allow us to go back and cut their budget. You can only ask. You can only ask them to cut their budget. They don't have to. And that's a tough situation.
Joe, I would, when you get into the state mandates, which a large percentage of them are unconstitutional, but it doesn't make any difference, I'd like to see a list with a dollar figure and what the total number is, broken down. And I think that should be a part of our budget presentation so people understand clearly, where that money's going, because it's just something. And then the state turns around and throws stones at us and wants us to cut taxes and cut property taxes and come up with all these shenanigans.
Or the amendment for the second homestead.
Yeah.
Look what it did to us.
Well, or what they tried to do with the increase in sales tax and eliminate property taxes. So, which didn't go through. But I just like, I'd like to see something along that line when we do the budget.
And that's a very good point. We have some more information on that. We'll work on that more as we go through the process. On actually the next slide here, I've got a little bit more information on those mandates.
Commissioner Slurry.
And if possible, the date when that mandate was implemented.
Okay.
So I think it's a progressively worse problem with more and more mandates coming down. Thank you.
And one other step that I don't think worth the effort, but I think it would be. I'd love to see our legal office look at that and read the constitutional law, just see if it's gray whether it's constitutional or not constitutional, because I know a lot of it is not constitutional, but they do it anyway, just like the federal government does.
Governor Cohen?
Next, we also have state agencies, state attorney, public defender, court system, guardian ad litem, medical examiner, health department, juvenile justice. They all fall under there. There's some overlaps between mandates and some of these other categories also. And then you get the last three categories are the ones that we really have full control over, the BCC departments, who have taken the largest cuts over the time because of that, partially nonprofits and our reserves. And here I've got a slide. The state mandates.
That was quick.
Yeah, we've got approximately about $53 million in total state mandates. If you include constitutional officer budgets, the state agency budgets, you've got Department of Juvenile Justice. That's a fairly recent one, $594,000, almost $600,000. That was implemented about 4 years ago, and has been ever growing since. We just got an invoice from them in the mail, and it's actually on the next budget amendment that we have, a $70,000 reconciliation that we got from the state that they said, well, we told you $594,000. We were $70,000 low on that. So we've got to fund that. And then actually just yesterday, We got another letter from them that in July we're going to have to pay another $19,000 extra. So they really seem to have utter disregard for any funding problems that we have. It's just increase that cost 20% mid-year on us, and rather than telling the Department of Juvenile Justice maybe they need to control their budget, they just send us the bill for whatever it costs them to do business.
Well, and that's why they won't control their budget, is because there is no oversight. In fact, the Association of Counties sued and won a few years ago. They got turned around, and then all of the counties caught the dickens from the state legislature because they were offended because they got sued over this.
That's right, and you have a difference whenever you take that link away. If the Department of Juvenile Justice had to fund that within their budget, there would be more incentive for them to cut the budget. But since you just send the bill to somebody else, there's no accountability, no repercussions for any overtime.
A good example is like the guardian ad litem program. The state said, okay, we started hiring attorneys inside rather than using attorneys out privately. And they said that saved them money. Well, I'm glad it saved them money, because what they did is they sent the employees down here, and we had to find them office space. They didn't like any of the office space that we found that was cheap. In fact, we pay their lease payment now. So, in other words, it cut the state's cost but increased mine considerably. So they just shifted cost.
Yeah.
That wasn't guardian ad litem. That was another court function.
We had the Regional Conflict Council.
The Regional Conflict Council. That's
and guardian ad litem a couple years ago was split out. They used to be under court.
I thought the guardian ad litem was mainly volunteers that do counseling and stuff.
That's
Counseling, I'd rent the
right, but
not the attorneys. That's the legal side.
But you still need
there are state employees that support it.
Yeah, there are state employees.
And we pay for their
child needs legal.
We pay for their lease for an office in Port St. Lucie, and all their computers and Blackberries and phones and all that stuff. Medicaid, that's another one, $670,000.
Yeah, we tried to stick them in the health building for free, but it wasn't good enough.
Right.
It was good enough for our employees.
Constitutional officers, I have them in that total.
Another point is, and if you look at all our buildings, like the courthouse, we have to support the courthouse, and you'll find that how do I say it? A lot of your sick building comes from state employees' complaints, not our own, and that costs us a fortune.
Well,
We better get off this slide.
We better get
I was going to have
and I
take some blood
got to admit, I've never seen a privately owned building have sick building syndrome, but I kind of see what you're saying.
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We have to provide the facilities for all those officers. That's not included in that. We've got about a $3.5 million facilities management budget. About $2 million of that is to support the courthouse, the facilities for the constitutional officers and the various state agencies, health department, and on top of that, that's outside of that budget that's not included in that $2 million is $970,000 for Sheriff Electric. So if you total that up, it's really about $2.9 million.
I would like to add here too, while we're on this page, our health department, I think, does a better job and is the most cooperative, and they work with us the best of any of these other agencies. I know you have them down there, but Miranda's here and Brad and those folks, their morale is always top notch. They're working hard for everybody. You never hear a complaint from them. So I just want to give them a plug, because I know
they met with us yesterday. They said, "Look, we understand that you're going to cut us. Give us an idea." We met with them. They're the most cooperative nonprofit and state agency we have. They're just tremendous. Right. They do a great job. And we talked about a 15% cut with them. They came in with their budget with the 15% already, willing to. They understand.
They do, and
that as hard as their environment is, they understand, and they've already worked with us.
Yep.
And I have to echo that. I know it's been said, but they've worked very positively with us, agreed to that, and also their other sources of funding are going down too.
And they're delivering health services to the needy here, and they're willing. That's what we need to keep in mind. All the nonprofits need to be, and state agencies need to cut. If the one giving health care can do it, everyone else can. And even if you get grant money, that doesn't mean we have to match it. We're chasing grant money right now, but we can't afford to chase it.
The next one on the list is the Value Adjustment Board. That was, I think we're in about the third year of that. We used to have our county attorneys work on that, and they said, no, you can't do that anymore. That's too efficient. You've got to hire outside people and pay them all this money. So that was an additional $86,000.
And that's up from 3 years ago before they started that. So that's 100% increase basically over what it used to cost, which was nothing.
Yes. Court system, a little under $300,000 in the general fund. Total is about $700,000 for the court system. I'll get into a little more of that later. Got medical examiner and health department for another $1 million. Here's the constitutional officers, just to see the magnitude of the $78 million general fund there. That's $49 million.
I would say that we have been luckier than most counties, and where we've had the constitutional officers cooperate in cuts. A lot of counties haven't had that. And they've cooperated. Some actually, I want to show you a slide. They've all cooperated, but it's just hard times.
Okay, there we go. This slide shows the 3-year history of cuts. You can see the BCC departments were down 6% 07, 08, 10%, 08, 09, 12.3% the year we're in. Clerk of the court has made substantial cuts over the last 3 years, 9% this year on top of 4 and 5. Property appraiser down 12%. 07, 08, 08, 09 was up slightly, largely because they had some aerial mapping that had to be added in, I think, and then about 2.1% down this year. Supervisor elections down every year, 5%. The 30% in 08, 09 is overstated because that's the year, mid-year, we added the optical scan voting machines. However, if you take that out, it was still about a 10% cut, and then down another almost 11% this year. State agencies have seen smaller cuts than the rest. The sheriff was up slightly in 07, 08, and 08, 09, and then down 2% in 09, 10, the current year. Nonprofits have seen large decreases, and quasi-nonprofits as well.
Is that it? You got another slide with this?
No, that's it.
There's two other ones. The tax collector's not in here. Also, I think when we look at the agencies like this, and when we do control these budgets, also emergency services, where they're at, what they've been cut, and or up, to put in, so you got the total picture. And the other thing, another question is, and I don't know the answer to this, but if, for instance, if the sheriff gets a grant, it comes through here, we approve it, and it becomes a part of the budget, and we work on it. But with the tax collector, and I don't know if the other agencies have it or not, but they're like a fee officer, and the clerk does to some degree, so we don't really have their total budget. We just have what we fund.
Yeah, and
that's why we don't have tax.
Let's explain the tax collectors. They wrote the law very nice for the fee. I pay for the states. I pay for the schools collections. The county, we pay for the schools collections. We pay for the city's collections. They don't have to pay for, if they increase taxes, we pay a percentage. We pay for their collections.
Do we get anything back?
At the end of the year, we do. The tax collector's office costs us very little money. We net it. I think, what does it cost me?
A little over $1 million.
A little over $1 million at the end. But I think, why should we pay for someone else's taxes to be collected? I don't mind paying for our own. That state law needs to be changed. They don't want to address it. Let's say the school board goes, I pay for the school board's collections. I pay for the municipalities. Why? Why doesn't everyone pay for their own collections? And it's a glitch in the law that needs to be changed in Tallahassee, in my opinion. And they say we do that because we get to approve their budget. In the 20 years I was budget director, or 15 years, I never saw the property appraiser or the tax collector send the Department of Revenue a budget. The Department of Revenue increased their budget every time they sent it to them. Never decreased it, because they don't have to pay for it.
That continued in my time as budget director, too, every year. So we can make that 25 years. Constitutional officers, there we see that. Okay. State agencies, as we talked about before, the health department, $644,000, and as we mentioned, they've been very cooperative in decreasing their budget. The courts, I'd like to spend some time on that one because the folks in Tallahassee, they're always talking to us about how local government's out of control and can't cut our budgets. Well, when there's a requirement in the state law for us to increase our funding for the court system by 1.5% year in, year out for the rest of time, I don't know how we're supposed to cut our budget. If we don't spend that 1.5% more each year, they'll take away our half-cent sales tax and state revenue sharing from us. It costs us $10 million. So obviously we've got to keep increasing the court costs. And as you see, the $282,000 is the total in the general fund. The total cost is about $700,000. We've got some other revenues when Article 5 came along to help fund some of those expenses. The problem is a lot of those revenues have dropped off substantially. They're down by about 2/3 from where they used to be. So if we increase their total, the $688,000, by 1%, we can expect the general fund amount not to go up by 1.5% next year. We can expect that to go up by $100,000, by 30%, because the portion that's being paid for outside the general fund is going down every year. That we've been in that situation for the last couple of years.
And even though they did create that to try and have the court system pay for itself, there's a little glitch in the law that says in the event they can't, the local county has to pay. So,
government tends to do that. I think to some degree local government does it too on a lesser scale because we don't have the authority of the state or the federal government. But some of the fees we charge, and we got into this before, with impact fees versus commercial industrial versus new housing built, for instance. The people moving in and buying new houses, etc., should pay the impact fee. They demand the services. But what we do is we go after the commercial, which provides a tax base, collects sales tax, employs people, and we charge them extra for being here and providing that service. So, sometimes we get, they go where the money is instead of where they ought to go, and the state and the federal government do the same thing.
Then Department of Juvenile Justice, $600,000. They're only $100,000 over budget this year, so I anticipate that number that we get from them will probably be higher next year. More of Tallahassee helping us cut our budget. We've also got New Horizons and Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council in here for a total of about $2.4 million. Next is reserves. We've got our contingencies, which is about $400,000. We've been taking on some more risk here in order to get the budget balanced. Our contingencies are down from where they were a couple years ago, but we're running a little risk because the end of the year comes along and we're in hurricane season. We had substantial additional expenses in 2004 when that happened to us. Had to do a budget amendment for the sheriff for $1 million for his overtime. We had several $100,000 in additional overtime for our departments that we really need that contingency. Transfers out, some of that's for transportation, the sheriff, the housing authority, and then cash forward is basically just as an accounting entry for carrying funds over to the next year because of the way that our tax revenues come in. They don't come in until December. Our fiscal year ends in September. We've got to have some money to carry forward, and that's another reason for fund balance. That when you look at the fund balance, you're looking at it as of September 30th is the way it's reported at the end of the fiscal year. However, it just goes down in October, November, and December until we get those tax revenues. BCC departments, about $17.5 million, 22% of the total. In there, as I mentioned before, mandates you'll find sprinkled throughout all these categories. Medicaid's in there, $673,000 of that. Facilities management is the largest single department out of that $17.5 million at $3.5 million. That includes $2 million for maintaining facilities for outside agencies. Also included in the total is the Emergency Management Base Grant, the FPL grant. There's a little wrinkle with the Emergency Management Base Grant in the Florida Administrative Code. We can't get that grant unless we spend out of our own sources for emergency management no less than the average of the last 3 years of expenditures. So that's another area where, for our emergency management department, if we cut that budget, it puts us in the position of losing a $100,000 EM base grant. So we've got a $500,000 change in the emergency management budget from the general fund that that if we cut that, we can jeopardize that EM base grant for $100,000. Also within there is about $1.6 million in electric, water, and sewer and telephone bills, total utility bills. And the main services provided, the two biggest ones, libraries, when you add them all together, $3.6 million, and parks at a little over $2 million. Pardon me. Nonprofits include children's services, $768,000, and the quasi-nonprofits for another $2.9 million. We've got the Humane Society, a little under $400,000. We're currently negotiating a contract with them, trying to hold the line and maybe get a decrease, but they actually are asking for a little bit of an increase over the life of the contract. Economic Development, $119,000. Gifford Youth Activity Center and Gifford Progressive Civic League get $105,000 and $15,000 respectively. We have contracts with them about that funding. Transportation is the Senior Resource Association. That expenditure is about 75% grant funded, 50% from the federal government, 25% from the state, and a 25% match from the county. Our local match is about $584,000. Treasure Coast Homeless Services is a little under $18,000, and then not on the slide is to round out this category is the Choose Life license plates. That's about $17,000, but that's all based on Choose Life license plate revenues. That's just an in and an out, so I didn't really show it here for that reason. It's not really a cost.
Before we go on, question. I would like to, at some point in time before the end of budget, I'd like to go back and get a presentation and reevaluate the quasi-nonprofits, how they were set up, why they were set up, and whether they should, if we should still continue them. I think some we should, maybe some we shouldn't, I don't know, but I'd like to look at that. The other thing is, and in these numbers and what our cost is, are you figuring in, for instance, the ones that may be renting a building for $1 a year or so on and so forth, which is, so is this a total picture or isn't it a total picture of the true cost?
Actually, I don't think, one other agency that's not in here that was an oversight for me is the Cultural Council. I think they were about $55,000 from here. But you're right, that doesn't include the cost. The Homeless Services Council rents the old health department from us for $1 a year. And not only that, we entered into an agreement to pay the electric bill there to lease some of the space back. So we've got a little expense there that's not included here for that. We're paying rent for their facility, and we can incorporate that.
Thank you.
I hope we've seen that slide already. Challenges moving forward. We've got existing collective bargaining agreements. We are currently in the second year of the agreements for the IAFF and the Teamsters. As I mentioned before, the IAFF gave up their COLAs but not their steps the year that we're in. The Teamsters gave up their COLAs and their steps. We will be approaching them both to see if they're willing to forego increases and look at making some change there for next year.
And we hope they cooperate, because I have to cut that much out before I start cutting payroll to break even. So what happens here is, let's say I need to cut $600,000 and they want $400,000 in raise. That means I got to cut $1 million out of payroll. So go ahead.
And you can see there that the cost of those is about $400,000 for the IFF and $437,000 for the Teamsters. As Joe mentioned, if anything's going up, that's more that we have to cut back down. And we also have the IAFF current year. Those were prorated raises. They got their raises April 1st, which is halfway through the year. So we'll have the annualized impact of that regardless, which is about $200,000 hitting us next year. In addition to that, health insurance we are not having a good year on health insurance. We're experiencing about a 20% increase through January. That's only 4 months into the year. We're hoping that gets better. We've actually been lucky over the last few years that we've had some good years, and maybe our luck is catching up with us. But we're looking at making changes to the health plan to reverse that trend and see what we need to do.
You know, overall, if the 20% increase is because of a few catastrophic type things, or is it just across the board with generalizing people using it more?
We've had one catastrophic one, but our stop loss is going to kick in. It's across the board. We're looking at everything. That's why we brought the insurance. We're looking at everything, looking at it. I know this is not popular to some people. The clinics seem to have helped in other areas where they opened up a clinic. We're also looking at changing some of it where we see abuse deductibles or things like that. Not so much abuse, but we see trend of large increases. We're also looking at maybe we're out to bid on everything. We're going to go out to bid on everything, maybe looking at a different prescription plan rather than being through Blue Crosses. There's others out there that we're going to shop. So we're looking at everything. This is always one of your biggest costs is your health insurance. I mean, for any government, ours is about 14 or 15 million a year. So it's a big number, and we're going to have to make adjustments. This doesn't factor, because I've been asked this, how the health insurance bill that was passed by the president. This doesn't factor any of those costs in, if there are any. There should be some costs, because I think they can keep dependents on our plan a lot longer, age-wise.
Right. They've increased the age that you keep dependents on. I think there's a prohibition against lifetime maximums, which ours currently is a 1 million lifetime maximum, and I think that's prohibited under the bill. That could be another potential impact going down the road, and I'm sure there are others as we go. There are also some legislative changes. It's not definitive yet, but there is always a bill out there about this time of the year for the new Florida retirement system retirement rate, and we're seeing an increase there. That if that bill is implemented, it'll be about an $850,000 increase countywide. About $700,000 of that will hit the taxing funds. That's including the constitutional officers, of course, but it's that could be a substantial increase if that bill does pass, because it's raising the rates on regular retirees, regular class retirees somewhat, and special risk a substantial portion, maybe about 20%. I think about 10% on regular class and 20% on special risk. State-aided libraries talked about that a little bit, and this time of year there are always other potentials out there, some pretrial release possibilities, and they're always talking about bumping up our Medicaid contribution this time of year. Also experiencing rising energy costs. That $176,000 of energy efficiency improvements was kind of eaten up with a rate increase from the City of Vero, and then they decreased the rate. So in the end, we're still paying pretty substantial energy costs. Our fuel prices are going up. We're concerned about those continuing to rise as we go. The economy, obviously, our other revenues dropping off, and there's the continuing challenge of need for services. Your libraries have become a big center for people going on the internet, doing a job search, things like that. Obviously, ALS, fire calls that don't decrease when the economy is bad. They happen when they happen, and that service has to be provided. What are our plans moving forward, strategies moving forward?
You know, we're looking at everything. We're reorganizing. We're going to look at reorganizing. Obviously, there's going to have to be staff reductions. There's been the hiring freeze. We've looked at privatizing, where any outside contracts where we're renegotiating, usually trying to negotiate them down. Salary reductions are on the table. Employee furloughs. Health insurance adjustments, increasing co-pays, employee premiums, clinics, 3-tier. We're going to look at it all to see what, because of the situation. Try and renegotiate union contracts. We're going to probably reduce our workers' comp rate since we're self-insured and take on more risk this year because we just can't afford the cost. We're looking at use of volunteers. Another thing is paying off. We've got one of the land acquisition bond issues is paid off this year. So that'll next year have a slight reduction on the tax bill. We could also pay off the other issue earlier, which will be paid off in 3 years. If we do that, that's about $1 million savings. If we were to pay it off using fund balance, that's a strategy. That way, if we had to go up in our general fund millage, there would be less debt service millage, so the taxpayer may not have an increase on their bill from our portion of the bill. Also, we're looking at prioritizing our services. What's nice to have and what our needs are. Obviously, this year the commission in the past has told us to try and do, keep service levels up. But this year we think that we're going to have to make some hard decisions. Service level adjustments, in beaches, pools, recreation programs, library hours. Those are things that that are hard decisions, and the commission's been, in the past, has given us direction to keep the service levels at the same. We think it'll be very hard with this third-year cut to do that. Look at nonprofits. Should we be funding even look at our quasi-nonprofits. If we haven't cut them in the last several years and continue to give them grant matches equal or larger, yet we've cut everybody else, I think we need to cut that or reduce it. We're also looking at allocating expenses differently, which will give us some savings in the general fund where our problem is. We're looking at a reserve. Everyone likes to talk about our fund balance. We don't want to, we could erode our fund balance and utilize fund balance. Let's say we use $5 million of our fund balance towards our taxes this year. Eventually, you're going to have to raise your taxes down the road $5 million. We were talking yesterday, St. Lucy's balanced their budget, county, they say they balanced it using $37 million in reserves in 1 year. What happens in the next, when that's gone? You have to increase your taxes $37 million to break even the next year. So those are games we don't want to play necessarily. We think that we're going to erode our reserves. We're looking at a 7-year plan to erode it down, but not to zero, but to a comfort level of, we've got high reserves. We do not debate that. But don't forget also, when I erode those, your interest earnings go down, because there's less cash to invest. So we're going to look at a plan to maybe reduce our reserves so there's not such an impact. But don't forget, when we start eating our reserves, there's a day you have to come out of that hole and then tax the people for it.
Right, and that's the. And we have a little interactive, since we're looking at our cuts, and we have what we call an interactive slide. So as you can see, for instance,
is this the slide with the good news on it now, Joe? Yeah. I'm kind of waiting for this all morning.
We're still working on that one.
It's a hard presentation to do because there isn't that much positive news out there, and I think and that's why we're coming early, is to get direction from the board. We're sending our budget packs out, and there's 2 or 3 questions I have for the board. I'm going to have to make mid-year cuts. Are we going to ask outside agencies and others to cooperate and make mid-year cuts? I cannot do it all on my own to break even. You can't take it out of your departments every year all on its own.
Well, if you want an answer to that now, I think we need to ask everybody to share the burden. Okay. So if we can address that question now, I think the answer is yes, from my point of view.
You want to go ahead and make that just a formal motion so we have that?
I'd be happy to make a motion that after this discussion, when we find out what our proposed mid-year cut is, and what I'd like to do is in the form of, if our mid-year cut is 3% or 5%, and it's a range, that we make sure that we don't ask them to cut more than we know we're going to cut. So if we know we're going to cut 3% and we might cut 5%, that we ask them to make a cut of at least 3%.
What if you hadn't cut them in the past and you've cut everybody else? That's the other thing you've got to be careful. We've cut ourselves in the past.
Well, for mid-year cuts, that's tough. That's perfectly fine to put that into the letter and let them know that it'd be nice, given the fact that you haven't shared in the cuts in the past, that you make a better effort. But I don't know at this point, halfway through the game, we can ask them to make a 10% cut when we're making a 3% cut this year.
Yeah, and it's, they've still got 6 months to do that. At a 3 to 5 year, you've got 6 months left in your year to do that. That's why we're coming. This is an example. If we have a 10% tax roll cut, and you asked everyone to we cut everything 10%.
Well, this is next year, right? Can we?
Yeah, next
why don't
year,
we just
yes.
address this one too? And if we can
Right.
have a motion, let's
So
see if
your
it's a
motion,
second.
the motion is to, whatever we decide our mid-year reduction is, that we ask all agencies
To make a similar
make the
cut.
same cut.
I'll second that. In fact, I said it earlier.
And Commissioner Davis?
I guess more just for a point of order, with this being a workshop versus a
Oh,
meeting.
you're right.
I don't think we should be.
Well, if you can give direction.
Procedures never scared me, and so
You give it a consensus and direction.
yeah, that's more appropriate than a motion.
So, then as far as consensus, I concur with the suggestion.
I concur.
Commissioner Fletcher, Commissioner Davis, all. Okay, so we have concurrence.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you, Commissioner, former Chairman Davis. Got to keep me in line a little bit.
And we're here because we don't have concurrency. No, that's...
So what this model does is it kind of shows in the 12% tax roll decline scenario for the general fund, we've got to cut 9.9%, basically, let's call it 10%.
Well, I think the first question we have is, does the commission want to give staff the direction to increase taxes? That solves a lot of our problems.
No.
Okay. Then we have to look at this model.
Okay.
Well, I guess the question is, are you talking about increasing the millage rate to where somebody might be paying the same tax as this year? Or are you talking about increasing the millage rate so that their actual taxes would increase? Because that's, in my mind, that's two different things. You can adjust the millage rate to where they're paying, their property value goes down, we increase the millage rate and they pay the same tax they're paying this year, or you increase the millage rate above that to where they're paying more tax dollars.
Mr. Chairman, there are actually two different questions in that, too. I mean, one is the desire, I'd be very happy to keep the same millage rate, but then we have to see if that's going to be, at the end of the day, realistic, if it means a substantial cut, and we think are the very essential services of our government. So, we're going to have to, I mean, I'm happy to say that the initial direction should be, look, everybody needs to cut 10%. But we need to be realistic enough to say that after they say the emergency services have had pretty significant cuts over the last years, and if we took another 10% cut out of the emergency services budget, then we would probably have to cut a fire station. So are we going to be willing to do that? So, I mean, it is, I think, a two-step process.
And just clarification, Jason, what we're looking at here would be keeping the millage rate where it is the current year. No change in the millage rate.
That's correct.
With a 12% decline in the tax roll would be basically a 10% cut across the board. Correct? Okay. Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, just follow up on what Bob said, and I've asked for this in the past, I think, previous commissions, but I would really like the commission to give direction at some point on prioritizing cuts. I think that some services we provide are more necessary and more important than other services we provide. If I need an ambulance, if I need a police officer, if my house is on fire, I need a quicker response than I do if somebody's coming out as a building inspector to check my, nothing's off the table. I'm not saying that, and I don't want to send that message, but I do think that when we start cutting down to the bone, we need to prioritize what services first we were set up for and what are really, really necessary from government.
Yeah, that's why, like in emergency services, last year we opened a new fire station, but we took it from fire prevention and we took it from management, and we also postponed some capital purchases because this environment we can't afford to replace things like we did. And we don't see that emergency service right now district's going to be our hardest challenge because we're going to probably erode reserves, and it's going to be everything's going to be a challenge. But we don't think it, and we realize that you do not want to reduce services. But this is to give you an example. If you decide.
Before we go on, I'd just like to add. I thought that last year during the budget process, we'd actually reached a consensus that police, fire, and transportation were the priorities. And now might be a good discussion to ask.
Now, when you say transportation, what do you mean?
Oh, we can get there. I mean, it used to be maybe
Roads?
Yeah.
roads.
Okay.
Yeah, repairing roads, potholes.
Roads and repairing roads,
Yeah.
not building new roads as a priority.
Yeah.
I mean, just making sure that our roads are still safe.
If we have a
to drive.
pothole, that's right up there.
Grading and repairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially since I have so many dirt roads in my district.
You need one graded?
Do they steal all that asphalt again?
It evaporated overnight, I swear.
So police, fire, and potholes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That being said, if you were to say, well, we can't cut 9.9% out of constitutionals, we can only cut 3%. If we stick that in there, what does it do to everything else? I've got to cut from our departments 21%. And
Well, you've got state agencies in there. What can be cut there? I mean, are they mandated or are they not mandated?
we can, we're going to send out a letter asking for their cooperation, make a recommendation. They say we have to fund them at a level which they can perform or do their function. I've already, the health department, for instance, which does a tremendous job. I met with them, and they're looking at it. They know it's 15%. So we've factored and discussed that with them. And I think we should ask everybody else for numbers in that range, to be fair. Because what we tend to do, the one that cooperates is the one that gets hurt.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cut that the other way, though. Jason, go back to the previous page. And I know you can't cut state mandates, but let's suppose we could. And let's suppose that we eliminated that $2.3 million. Then what would everybody have to pay? And let's take the 3% out of the sheriff's office, put it back where it was with the other, just to get an idea. So, if you could eliminate state mandates, and I'm not suggesting that because I like the health department or other things, but I'm just trying to get a picture on both sides of the equation here. There's some things that in our budget that we may be able to eliminate. And so it's not just everybody increasing or not cutting so it's a two-edged sword here when it gets to budget.
And Jason, can you go to the next slide just to hit something? At the last budget hearing for the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, I asked them to forego some capital expenses mid-year and thinking about saving about, it's not a huge amount, but it's about $30,000, $35,000 this year, and then duplicating it next year so they could actually cut the dues amount. And I'd like to get a consensus here. If you'd like me to put together a letter and then maybe have the chairman review it, or probably the attorney review it rather than the chairman, and see if we can send the Treasure Coast Planning Council a letter now.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm in favor of that, but really, this is no different than, in my opinion, than our legal department last year. I don't know where they've cut prior coming up to this, but if it's been 0, 0, 0, and then now all of a sudden, I think really it ought to fall in line with everything else that's been in the free fall decline. So if it's been 30% since...
Well, their dues have been flat for about 4 or 5 years.
I think
their dues have not gone
nonprofits
down.
and agencies that have been cut for the last 3 years and that some have not been cut at all, they should have to catch up.
That's what I'm saying. That's
And we'll take
exactly
care of
my point. And so if it's just that much, to me, that's not enough. I mean, we need to pull everything else in line. For anybody to think that they're above the budget acts is wrong in this instance. And if they haven't for the past several years, it goes exactly what Commissioner Wheeler was saying. For those that cooperate are those that are really, they're the ones that are getting hurt.
And sometimes,
And that's not right.
It can come out of, you've got to remember when you're paying an outside agency, they've got an accounting department, they've got management, and then they've got the services, and they'll tend to tell you they're going to cut services first. We haven't cut services, and the commission has not cut any service. In fact, look at last year. You cut $10 million out of the budget. You opened a whole new library and a fire station. You added services to the community.
Well, they talk about cutting services because they realize that's what gets the dander up on the public when they read the article in the newspaper. They're going to cut services. And everybody keeps coming to the government for more and more services, and everybody complains every year about more and more taxes. And I think there's got to be a medium here someplace. At some point in time, we got to say enough's enough.
If I can go back to, I just want a consensus of how hard this board wants me to fight, say, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council on this, and I'll be happy to I don't want to do it singly because we have two commissioners on that board, and I don't want to go out individually representing the board
It's time for them to pay up. I mean, it is time for everybody.
Yes.
And if that's the consensus, I'm happy to go forward with that.
And I know
They
that's
have a
going to be
large- I
tough.
looked at their financials. They have a good fund balance.
And
And I know that's only a small part of it. I mean, it's
yeah, but their dues are roughly a third of their budget.
What are you talking about with it?
And sometimes we've taken on functions we shouldn't have. For instance, we've got here, you've got the hospital district. We take on health issues, and you've got a hospital district.
You know, and I understand what you're saying. And that's a fight for another day, and it is appropriate for us to look at that. But we can go into a whole bunch of things that we're doing that other departments should be doing, and vice versa, that we should do that other departments should have no business in. But we'll get nowhere fast today with that.
Yeah. See, we had this interactive thing so that you knew if we were to send out a letter to the constitutionals, this is why we're having the meeting today, all the budget packets are getting ready to go out. We want to give direction to everyone who's submitting. And I'd like some discretion on this. For instance, the constitutionals will be sending a packet out to them. We're asking for direction on the board. What kind of direction do I give them? Do I ask them to reduce their budget due to the environment we're in, and how much?
Well, we've got to start by asking them to reduce the budget, and I think that the starting point is to ask them to reduce the budget by as much as we're reducing ours.
And then, and of course, going into the budget year, depending on what they can do midstream, is going to affect, just like you said
we'll do
earlier,
next year.
What we'll have to do October 1st of next year.
So that would be a 9%. We're going to ask the constituents to reduce the budget 9%, 9.9 or.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have to ask. I mean, to be fair, we're asking everybody else the same thing.
It's like everything else. We got to have negotiations and start someplace and work it out as we go through this process.
If we have to also be realistic, because if we only get 3% from them, there's no way I can cut 20% more after cutting 3 years of double digits. So we're going to have to start to decide on programs, I think, and that's the kind of this year. I think that we are going to have to decide on some programs, and I'm willing to do that if you give me the direction is to start.
I think we got
to keep taxes down.
Oh,
We're just not going to deliver the services, be able to deliver the services at the level we have in the past.
And then here we've got those mandates raising their head again because we've got a 21.2% for state agencies, let's say. Well, that Department of Juvenile Justice is going to be fixed. We can't get them to cut. We just don't have the ability, and it's probably actually going to go up based on this year. So a 21% total for state agencies means a 28.3% for everybody else. And actually, if I said what I actually think is going to happen, here's where we go. So we really get into some.
Yeah, I think what we're going to have to look there is where can we cut. We may have to cut a nonprofit totally out that we weren't funding because and then we think the CRA money is going to be down because obviously it's related to. Listen, CRAs are a very big problem for us on the long run. Because any increase in taxable value goes back to the government. Yet you still have to, the sheriff still has to deliver services. You still got to have a jail. You still got to pay for your courthouse, and you get zero new money.
Well, no, it's a little difference with the sheriff. I mean, you have the courthouse and the jail, but the sheriff's not taxed for the municipalities that have a police department out of that district. So there's a separation there in the budget. One comes out of the MSTU, the other portion, the law enforcement comes out of the MSTU,
but
and it also comes out of the general
fund. I have
fund.
to cut a check to the CRA for the value out of my.
No, I know that
increases my budget.
Yeah, but that's one of the services. Now, fire and EMS is another thing. But I don't know how you'd even put this together because I'm not a lawyer. But, we may be getting to the point where some of the counties need to go together and be bold and sue the state rather than the association, just like some of the attorney generals are doing to the federal government for passing down unfunded mandates. Someplace, somebody's got to take a stand and say enough's enough. Because we keep, and then everybody gets upset when we don't provide a service that the state says we should be providing because they don't fund it.
Well, in line with that, I think what we need to do is take a good look at what all the state mandates are and what the costs are, and
Right.
when we got them, and then first engage the political process and make a clear presentation to our delegation, and sooner rather than later.
Mr. Chairman?
That's been going on every year.
Mr. Davis?
I think that looking at the automatic increases in the court system, that's ludicrous. I mean, as far as us, anybody having an automatic increase in today's climate just defies logic. And then secondly is to, instead of just fighting the issue, just fight the philosophy that simply says that, I mean, there's never going to be enough money. All they want is money from whenever we're supposed to fund it, but we have no control over cutting it, and they define what adequate is. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chair.
No,
One of the problems with, as Bob said, going to the legislative delegation, that's a good thing. But, as a commissioner, I've been up there, as you guys have. As a sheriff, I've been up there. And, when I'm in Tallahassee, I'm not lobbying for the Board of County Commissioners. I'm not, as a sheriff, I'm lobbying for what's good for me as a sheriff. And it's the same thing. So you go to the legislative delegation, everybody goes to Tallahassee and starts lobbying the legislature, depending on who gets to who makes the best story, and so on and so forth. And what it does is it reduces it down, gets more personal, and they keep handing these mandates out. I think that somehow you need some level ground and get a judge or even the state Supreme Court to look at this and say, this is out of line, it's unconstitutional, and just cut it and say, if they are unconstitutional, I believe a lot of them are, they say, okay, it's unconstitutional, you can't do it anymore, because they ignore the state constitution on a lot of these state mandates. But I agree with the process, as Commissioner Solari said, but the problem is everybody else out here is going through that same process, and it's either who gets there first or last, or with the most information, or does the best sales pitch.
Senator Negron has a bill going forward to have more oversight and accountability with the Children's Services, the privately run agencies. And here we have the Department of Juvenile Justice, a state agency with no oversight.
That's right.
It just doesn't make sense.
Well, it's one of the problems in the past, to go back, and even before I was there, when Sheriff Dobeck was there, it was at its worst. The state was letting people out serving 11 to 17, 18% of their sentence. They go back into the community and they're picked up for violation of parole or for another crime, and then violation of parole kicks in. They keep them in the county jail for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, because the state wouldn't accept them because they didn't have capacity for them. So you're paying that cost out of your local tax dollars. It's a state cost and it's a state problem, but the county's picking it up. And that's just one example of a mandate that shouldn't be there.
Jason, can you go back to the general fund page and let's put everybody at the 9.9% cut? This point, I know there's a couple of constitutional officers here. I don't know if they want to take this time to comment on anything, or if there's anybody else in the audience, or Miranda, if you want to say anything.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Sheriff.
I certainly appreciate the opportunity and I think this is healthy to chat about these things. A couple small questions. I know Mr. Baird talked about the OPEB. And as you know, that costs the Sheriff's Office about $1 million a year.
What was that?
The post-employment benefits for retirees. If we can talk about that cap that you
if you want, that cap should hold it from going down. Also, if the constitutionals don't want to offer it to their employees, they don't have to put it in their budget.
Okay.
And Joe, can you just explain so everybody here knows what we're talking about, what the OPB covers?
Yeah, what it is, it's employee benefit costs. What it is, it's retirement benefit costs. We subsidize locally. The commission a few years ago decided to subsidize employees' health insurance costs once they retire if they've been with the county over 15 years. And it was a GASB 34 came along, or was it 43? 43, yeah. Sorry, I transposed that. 43 came along and said, you have to account for them. If you're offering these benefits, you have to account for them and put them on your books and accrue the costs. Now, when you accrue the cost, and you can accrue the cost but not put the money aside. Now that's not the smartest thing I would recommend, but you are allowed to do that. Now we don't think, because if you don't put the $2.7 million aside this year and you wait till next year, now it's 5.4. You wait, you're just getting yourself in trouble. But we don't know what it's going to do yet, Sheriff, but we're looking at capping it.
Right.
So that it doesn't go up.
Which would be a reduction of some
Which,
sort.
yeah, down the road it would. Maybe this year we could reduce it. I think that would help.
Joe, currently it's a percentage, and you're talking about capping it
Well,
at a
at the
fixed
dollar
dollar
amount we're
amount.
funding right now this year.
Right.
And incidentally, most counties surrounding do not fund OPEB, St. Lucie for sure. So those are things that, I applaud Mr. Baird for being conservative in that and planning for the future, but most counties do not fund that.
So if you don't fund it, what does that do? Does it just leave it as a future problem?
Yeah.
Future responsibility?
Yeah.
So that's funding the way the federal government does, and I, for one, didn't run for office to fund things like the federal government does.
But a cap certainly could save us
They
some
do
dollars.
have to book the liability on their financials. We put the money aside each year. We make everyone budget, put it aside, so it's down the road, a commission, down the road 15 years from now, a commission comes in and says, well, you owe $40 million to employee benefits. What are you going to do? That's why we do it. We put the cash aside.
Right. And that's wise, but if there is a cap, that would certainly help us out tremendously. As you know, we're searching workers' comp. Workers' comp is about $600,000 to the Sheriff's Office. We've always shopped that. We'll continue to do that. And please be mindful, we have 3 more weeks in the legislature, so in this session. So there's some things that could pop up. There's some bills that talk about different bonds for inmates and us having to keep them longer. And there's also some bills talking about releasing some violent folks, which I'm obviously not in favor of. So I can tell you the news today with respect to public safety in Indian River County is wonderful. Our crime rate statistics are out today, and we have a 6% decrease. We have got to maintain that, as Commissioner Wheeler said. So we will do our part. We will continue that, but please be mindful that we must maintain the public safety that we have. We talk a lot about fund balances and reserves. And obviously, if you take from reserves, then the interest accrued throughout the year will be less. I understand and I recognize that. One question would be on the fund balances. How much money are we talking? How much fund balance do we have?
Our fund balance, it depends what fund. The general fund is what you're concerned with. I think hang on a second, I'll look it up here. I've got it right here. Yeah, it's 45. It's 40. Yeah, it's 45 million for the general fund, MSTU combined. We have
Is that unrestricted?
Unrestricted.
We
We've
have
got some restricted for Piper.
Right. Okay.
So, plus the local reserves. So those are just things to talk about.
Actually, the financials show it at 52 million.
Yeah, but with the, I was talking about the MSTU is also in that.
Yeah,
MSTU is included, yeah.
Right. Those are just some numbers to take into consideration, but absolutely, we'll do our part and continue to provide the best service that we can. And I know that we're doing a remarkable job, so we're on board with you.
Good. Thank you, Sheriff. Any questions or comments for the Sheriff?
Now, the FRS contributions, those rates change. We're watching those closely, as well as those other bills that I mentioned that could impact us. Unfortunately, none of the bills that we're watching will save us money, to be quite frank with you, and we've all got our fingers crossed. 3 more weeks to go, and we should have some more clear direction.
If I could ask, Sheriff, you might have your pulse on this. The language as far as the change for the 10% vesting or 10-year vesting for the FRS, has that seen the light of day yet?
Actually, it's 6 years, and
It's 6 right now, but they were talking about raising it to 10.
I haven't seen that.
I think that one did pass committee.
It did pass committee?
Okay.
Carol Jean?
I think it's gone.
It's dead? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And they just lowered that a few years ago.
Yeah.
6.
Yep.
Was it 10?
Was it 8?
Well, 8 for elected, but it was 10 for employees.
Oh.
And they lowered it to 6 for everybody.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Diane Bernardo, Finance Director. I actually had just a couple of points, and then I want to comment on a couple of other comments that you made. I just wanted to remind, Jason, can you do me a favor and go back to the constitutional officers and show the budgets? First of all, I just wanted to remind the board that on the clerk side for the county only, I'm talking about the county courthouse, not court administration, the board has not provided any capital outlay, nor have we requested it since Article 5 came into being. We have paid for our own capital outlay over there. The 1.5% that the boys are talking about, that is strictly for court administration. That has nothing to do with the local courthouse. Jason is right, there is that mandate that's on there, but that is to fund court administration. It's headquartered out of St. Lucie County, 19th Judicial Circuit. The other thing I just wanted to remind the board that we have implemented at the clerk's office a salary freeze, no bonuses, and no steps since January of '08.
Diane, if I could go back to the 1.5% that goes to St. Lucie County for the administration.
Well, it's for court administration. I don't want you to think it's St. Lucie. It's just that court administration is basically housed. Most of the court administration people are housed out of the St. Lucie area. But it's for all constitutional. Pardon?
Are you trying to say that it's not for the clerk of the court?
It's not for the clerk of the court. It's for court administration. Right.
I guess really help me with the logic that it should increase on 1.5%, or can you, if you can't, that's fine, but I just...
No, that was a state mandate that had really nothing to do with us. They needed additional services. One of the things that they did is they expanded their capital. I'm talking court administration expanded their capital outlay. They put in the lines, the fiber optics. They got new computers. They had additional people. They hired additional people. So that administrative body handles all 5 counties or 4 counties: Indian River, Martin, St. Lucie, and Okeechobee. And that 1.5%, we do a report every year to show that Indian River County is in compliance. It's this huge report that we have to do in the state's attorneys, what we contribute to the state attorney, and what we contribute to the public defender, and what we contribute to guardian ad litem, and for court administration, and then the local match that's needed for the courthouse. There's imputed type things like you guys pick up the electric, you pick up the court space, you pick up the maintenance. We have to do all that and show that. So what I wanted to clarify is that there is a mandate. They're absolutely right, that 1.5%, but it does not go to the local clerk of court or courthouse.
Yeah. It's just the state agencies. You're trying to clarify it's not you guys, it's the court admin, state attorney, public defender, all that stuff.
The other thing I just want to remind everybody, now I realize everybody's got a cut, and I think if you go back to our slide, you'll see that we did a 9% cut last year, which was huge for us. That is to house finance and clerk to the board functions. Okay, you do not pay for non-court things such as passports, marriage license. We pay for that out of fees. IT department, we paid out of recording fees. In the courthouse, all the courthouse operations, of course, all that money now was changed last year. It goes up to the state. You guys don't fund that. We pay for that out of the court fees. That is now an appropriation that is on the courts. For the court side is for the state, even though they're considered county employees because it was the easiest thing for the state. We're still required by whatever board policies that you guys develop, OPEB, FRS, all those things. What I was trying to get, my point was the magnitude of a 10% cut on $1 million budget versus a $46 million budget obviously is huge. So all I'm saying is I appreciate, Wesley, that you brought up the fact that there are those of us who have every year contributed. You've asked us to take a reduction. We have done that. We have cut our staff in the finance department. I am physically doing the inventories, me, the finance director. So I appreciate that comment. But I just wanted to tell you, while you're asking for these budget cuts, we just need to take into account 2 things. There are those of us who have done it every year, and there are those of us that are so small on that scale that a 10% cut to us is going to be huge.
That's a good second point. And
go back to that slide.
Okay.
I mean, again, when you talk about the relationship of the cuts that the BCC departments have made have been greater than even the clerk of the court cuts. We appreciate your efforts, but we're not asking you anything that we haven't already done and that we anticipate doing in the next budget session.
And I understand that, but what I'm saying is when you ask us to take a 10% cut across the board for the constitutionals, a 10% budget cut on a $46 million budget and a 10% I'm going to be a peanut compared to what the other constitutional officers.
We're asking you to cut no more than $1 per dollar. If we cut 10%, regardless if we're $100 million or $200 million, which we're not, it's no more than if you're $1 million. I mean, we're asking you to cut relationship-wise the same type of cut. And as you go back in the history, we've cut more than you have over the last 3 years.
If another constitutional only cuts, let's say, 2%.
Okay, that's the other constitutionals, and I can't speak for them or argue for them. I'm just saying that we're not asking you to do anything more than we've done and plan to do. And I think that's the only equity that we as a commission can speak of.
And this year, we're going to try and people that haven't cut as much in the past, we're going to catch it up this year. Those people that haven't, and even if it's in the form of a grant match, we're going to do it.
Okay.
I just wanted to say a couple things too, and I only just compound what I guess Jason has said. This year, I noticed when we of course handle all the unemployment for the county, and we also handle the COBRA payments. And one of the big things I see a big impact on this year that affected our cash flow is now we subsidize 65% of the COBRA payment, which of course is going to be probably running out around November. And the other mandate that we had this year was that we had increased unemployment benefits that we had to pay. And so we went from 13 weeks to 26 weeks. So that was a big impact. And so that applies to everybody who was laid off. So the board also has to fund that subsidy for the COBRA as well as the additional unemployment because we are self-insured on the unemployment. I just wanted to bring that up.
I got a question about the COBRA. I was under the impression that COBRA, if somebody leaves, they're allowed to keep under COBRA their health insurance for like 18 months.
18 months, yes, but
they pay the full shot on that. The county doesn't participate in that.
No, there was a change. I want to say April
with the stimulus
of last
bill,
year.
Oh, okay.
I think it was April that we went in and it said that if the employees opt to stay on COBRA,
the federal government
mandate
changed that, and they hurt us pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You actually take that through your quarterly payroll taxes. There's a new line on when we do our quarterly payroll taxes.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, the other thing I just wanted to say too, and this is really more to Joe, I appreciate, even though the surrounding counties have not funded the OPEB, if you don't fund that OPEB, Joe's absolutely right, you're going to have a huge liability on the books. That is a non-cash liability, but it is a liability that eventually has to be funded. I personally am not a proponent of not filing because if you don't pay now, you're going to pay later, and you're going to pay later at a bigger dollar cost. So if you put in $1 today, with that OPEB trust was set up so that we project interest in things earning on that, because you'll see in a couple weeks when we bring our reports back, you go out on a little more aggressive investing than the portfolio. The portfolio is very safe. We have no derivatives, nothing. I mean, that's why we earn a low interest rate. But when you look at the OPEB trust, you'll see those investments are different, earning a greater amount of money. I just want to remind the board that your $1 today is not going to be your $1 that you're going to put in next year for that OPEB liability. But they did do the right thing. They addressed it about the future hires, cut the benefits for future hires, and I think that needed to be done, and I think that's what you're going to see the surrounding counties. And that was it. I thank you.
And Diane, on that point too, we financed some of our utility bonds this last year, and because we're fiscally conservative, we do put money away, we are cash funded, we actually got our bonds upgraded, which gave us a considerable interest saving. So it is money we have to take out now, but it is money well put aside.
And it's funny because I went to a conference a few months ago, and I ran into the bond people, and I got to tell you, every one of them that I dealt with on this last issue, because Jason and I go on a team, and then you have to answer questions and provide information. It was amazing how many people thought Indian River County was one of the best fiscally managed counties in the state of Florida, and that we had a great name, and we have a AA rating. I mean, there's only one more basically rating, two, I guess, if you include the minuses in there, that you could have. So I'm very appreciative, and I'm glad that I work here. We got a good team, and I appreciate very much working, and I work very closely with Jason's department, and I appreciate all those people that are sitting up here. So
I can tell you that I agree with that in other aspects, although with the sheriff's office when people would go away, and across the board in this county. But also, you and Jeff Barton have done a good job with our investments and protecting them and reading the tea leaves before, and we're able to get out of things before they went downhill. And I think, and I've said this before, but I think Jason and Joe deserve accolades for the fiscal position this county's been in. I mean, people are hurting in Florida, including us, but we aren't hurting near as bad as the vast majority of the counties in this state, and I think all of you deserve accolades for that.
Thank you.
I agree. Thank you.
With the board's indulgence, I would like Carol Jean to sit up for 1 minute, please. I'd like to hear more from the audience and continue this discussion. Yes. We're at a time where we need to take a break. So if it's everybody concurs, we'll take a 10-minute break and then come back for more comments. We'll be back at 10:45. We'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. We had left off with hearing from some of the constitutionals, and Carol Jean, welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
My executive director is here with me today, Craig Lombard, whom you all met last week. Also, Eve Preet, our finance director, our director of finance. And I just want to thank you. We met with Mr. Beard last week and talked about the state of the tax collector's office and, of course, the state of the county, and heard a little bit about what you all are doing. And I just want to thank you for, frankly, for putting this together now and letting each of us know and the community what the situation is. I know it's tough. I have been doing all I could do, which is kind of why I was able to answer the question on the retirement system, to keep track of the legislation that's going on that affects all of our offices, and have tried to lobby, because like you say, the one-on-one with people you know, and many of us have helped in those elections, can influence the bills that get out of Tallahassee, because there's a lot up there that affects many offices. In particular, the rewrite of 197, which is the entire statute for the tax collector's office, hopefully could be changed this year, and it will allow us to take a lot of what we do into the 21st century, more electronic, more inexpensive, conservative ways of doing things. So we're hoping that's going to pass. We continue to work on it, but we have little things, as we talked to each of you about, that affect those big bills that could cause them not to pass. But I will continue to do that. We have cut our budget for several years in a row. We will continue to be as frugal as we can be, as conservative as we can be. Again, try to bring the office into more electronic means so we can save money that way. We are being, as I discussed with each of you, given mandates for additional services. The complete driver's license operation will be given to us, as I mentioned to you, and so we're going to have to take all that into consideration. But we're happy to do it, and happy to do it in a county that I think shines in living in paradise, and also in the way you all run everything you do. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, are you really happy that you have to take over the licensing and so on and so forth? And is the state going to give you, and we talked about this the other day, but do you believe the state's going to give you enough money to cover your additional cost on that? Do you think it's going to be a break even, or is it going to be another mandate that's going to cost you and the county money?
It is going to cost us more money. I am glad to be able to do it for the citizens, because it's one-stop shopping, and I think our office are excel in customer service, so that's going to be good for the citizens of Indian River County. It is going to be expensive. We currently receive $6.25. That's up $1 from last year to issue a driver's license. Right now, with the new Real ID Act, which I always want to talk about to the public, because there's so many documents that are required now to get your driver's license, and we want to be sure everybody knows that, hopefully before they come in the office, so they'll bring them with them. It's a process that getting a driver's license used to take 4 to 5 minutes, and now can take up to 20. So there's a huge cost with it. The $6.25 nor the $5.25 fund the operation. So yes, sir, we will have a cost there.
Let me see how it goes for you, because I think at some point in time you're going to need additional space to handle the additional customer base that you're going to have, and you do a good job. Your girls over there are all very polite and courteous, and also very helpful, and they do move people in and out. So, but it's going to, I don't know, we'll wait and see, but I think it's going to create a backlog for you, and you're going to need more space, but we'll see where it goes. But it's just another thing that the state keeps pushing down.
It is, but we'll do it better.
I know you will.
But you all allow us to do that. You allow us to do it on this beautiful property and make it pleasant for the citizens of Indian River County, and our 2 branches function that way as well. And we'll just work with it. We'll do it as conservatively as we can, but also, we do expect it to have a huge impact. But thank you.
Thank you, Carol Jean. Any other comments? So anyone else would like to comment on the where we are right now? Good. Miranda, welcome.
I'm Miranda Swanson. I'm the administrator at the Health Department. First of all, I wanted to thank the Commission and Joe for your comments this morning. We try the very best we can to do the best with the money that you give us. Some years that's been more challenging than others, specifically the last 4 years since I've been here. But certainly I think we've looked under every rock. We've looked where we can be more efficient. Similar to what the county has seen, we've increased visits over last year by 13% with less money. Certainly the county's support and Joe's support of us has meant a great deal to me. It's made my job easier. I realize we have to contribute. I understand that each agency has to cut, and certainly we've done our part and we will continue to do our part. The other piece that I'm very cognizant of is the amount that the county gives us between the building maintenance and utilities. That's certainly a cost that we couldn't bear, but we also try to contribute where we can to improve the facility. And we have done that. I mean, I know that a few of you have been through our facility since we've done our lobby renovation. We actually have seen some of our Medicaid revenues go up. We've seen an increase in clients since we've made that lobby nicer. I will tell you, for our H1N1 response, when we hosted all those immunization clinics at the Health Department, it made a huge difference. And the other piece of this is, and we're facing multiple budget reductions this year, but unless things change, and they could in the last 2 weeks of the legislative session, we're still hoping to increase our visits next year. And we're going to do our best that we can to maintain services.
And Miranda, you guys do a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Every time I'm over there, the morale of all the employees is so high, and you all are just doing a fantastic service for the community. And I know during these tough times, your visits probably go up because people are looking for that service more and more, and you've got revenue going down, but you're still delivering a high level, high quality service. So just great job, and please keep it up. Yeah.
Well, and I'm happy to be accountable to all of you. Certainly with Joe and Jason, I went through a similar presentation to what I do for the hospital district coming up next week, next Thursday on the 15th. But looking at our visits, looking at our proportion of patients in terms of their level of poverty. The proportion of our patients that are self-pay is about 60% level of poverty. 150% of federal poverty is about $14,000 for an individual. If you look at our self-pay patients, 86% of our self-pay patients are at that 150% level of federal poverty. So we're serving the poorest of the poor. We just did our customer satisfaction surveys, and those came out extremely positive. And our staff has gone without raises for 4 years, and I can't say enough good things about them.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Miranda, you brought up the H1N1 response, and it appeared to be, for all intents and purposes, near flawless. You had several days and nights of mobilization, and you had many employees with vests, a lot of volunteers with vests. Did you receive additional compensation from anywhere else for all the resources that you had expended?
The federal government had given us about $383,000, and that's just from memory for H1N1 response. That was one-time response. That was to fund our, not only for preparedness, but also implementation of vaccination activities. We received the vaccine, the syringes, those sorts of supplies at no cost, but there are lots of things that we had to do, including pay our staff time to be able to work those clinics. So that was the money we received. We didn't go outside of that budget. We stayed within it. And certainly on our H1N1 response, that wasn't something we did by ourselves. We had fire rescue that brought in their ambulances. We had certainly the county support. We had the Parks and Recreation support with the additional lights from out front of the fairgrounds. Certainly the gentleman out there was helpful when we had our clinic out there. We pulled together not only with the health department, but with the county to provide those services.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Coram. I've lived here 36 years, county. By the way, 18 years ago, I did a lot of research about impact fees, agriculture, residential, commercial, industrial. So 18 years ago, I found out the residential impact fees are very low, to where whenever residential comes to our county, back then, 18 years ago, that means our taxes, everyone that lives here, our personal taxes will go up because impact fees are low, because we need to hire more firefighters, more deputies, do more roads, as you know, all that kind of stuff. We have to increase because of all the residential people that come here. And I just found out, oh my goodness, that the impact fees in our county is down 85%. One of the things that's really hurting our economy really bad. Like I said, 18 years ago, I did my research. I wish I would have been on county commission 18 years ago. I would have helped change the economy, just to teach you all about that. And just something that just happened recently, yesterday, a developer, 50-50, you have to split things, even though their impact fees went down. So you gave them a $109,000 discount. He gave them 25% discount again. He gave them $109,000. And also, like I said, all the development, okay, like there's 2 big subdivisions, down on 53rd Street, to where it's just to build a road, it's going to cost about $3.7 million. Okay? But since the impact fees are low, all of us are having to pay for that, to where just for residential impact fees. Like I said, back 18 years ago, residential impact fees were low, and the county went way down in impact fees. So that's one of the things that's hurting the budget in Indian River County, to where I hope you guys can change the impact fees. And even look at commercial development. You have to, the firefighter fees went down, but we need more firefighters, so I wouldn't go down in price in that, because that's very important for our county. So anyway, keep the impact fees in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Please, come on up.
Thank you. I don't know the procedures here, but I'm here.
Just give your name and address, please.
The newspaper said Indian River may cut 30 jobs. My concern is that you're not thinking about jobs. I want no cuts in anybody's payroll. Let me read this. It seems to me that this is the wrong way to cut. We may need new thinking. We need to promote jobs. We need people, not layoffs. Layoffs only creates a different tax on us in that you got to pay them when they're laid off. The people that Joe Baird would cut must have jobs that need doing, including that maintenance man at the bottom of everybody. Then try something different. Reduce the pay of everyone, starting with county commissioners and Joe Baird. I don't know that the calculation, whether it's 2% or 5%, but cut it enough to save the 30 jobs. A new policy would give all employees a sense of security, knowing that the county would keep them working. The county already has too high unemployment. In good times, the pay can and does go up. There was a time when every year it went up according to cost of living. Now you talk about freezing. Freezing won't do it. You've got to cut everybody's pay the even amount. I hope you'll get some new thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. If we could have your name and address for the record, please.
Morning. Walter Geiger, 3944 58th Circle, Vero Beach, Florida. I'd like to make a suggestion that you might be able to better utilize some of the staff in the emergency services department. You have 4 fire stations in the county that are very underutilized during the time when the snowbirds are up north.
That's it.
In fact, some of the ambulances there have less than 1 transport every day, which means the firefighters are obviously, I don't know what they do when they don't have transport. I assume they sit around and read and play cards, whatever they do. It's my understanding that these stations could be operated very efficiently with just 4 firefighters instead of 5. So during these times when these stations are practically not underutilized, it'd be good to use these firefighters to take the place of other firefighters in the county so they could do training. You have other stations where people are calling in sick. Therefore, you could move these people around to different stations so that they would be less overtime utilized, and so that other firefighters could do training and everything. I don't think it would cut services at all because these stations are very underutilized 6 months out of the year. I think this is an opportunity to reduce some of your costs as far as your emergency services budget. I hope you take that under consideration.
Thank you very much for your comments, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. Somebody asked me if I was here to talk about children's services. Well, I'm not today. I want to talk about your going forward strategies of reorganization. When I was reviewing your personnel schedule, I'm sorry, I'm Beverly O'Neill, 9790 Sebastian, Florida. When I was reviewing your personnel schedule by department, I found that you had 38 staff assistants scattered about in the various departments, 5 part-time, and 4 BTs, and I didn't know what a BT was, but I...
Budgeted temporary.
Okay.
A temporary employee.
Okay. I was thinking that if you pulled those staff assistants, in this electronic age, it certainly should be possible to do that they can communicate with each other. They can communicate within the departments and do the work that's necessary for all of these departments where they're assigned separately. And you might get some economies of scale out of that. You might save on equipment and space and et cetera by having them in a pool. It doesn't have to be a physical pool. It could be a virtual pool connected by the wonderful electronics that you have. The other thing that I've always wondered about is you have 3 housing-related divisions or departments, and with a combined total of 7 personnel. And I'm wondering if you could think about putting those all in one office. There's the Housing Authority, the Section 8 rental assistant, and the SHIP. IRCLHAP SHIP. Those 3 organizations.
Yeah, 2 of those are housed together.
Well, it doesn't say so on your organizational chart.
Yeah, that's
Joe.
because of the way the federal government makes us do that. One of those departments falls under the Housing Authority, and we contract for rental assistance with the Housing Authority to utilize their people. So it's already combined.
Okay. But one's under community development, SHIP is under community?
The SHIP's under community development.
Yeah,
That's
and the
one.
other 2 are under
Yes.
general services. That's what I'm talking about putting together. So I would thank you. I'd like to say that accessing the budget through the computer was a real dream this year. It was easy for me. I'm not too computer literate, but I work at it. And it was easy to go through, and I finally found out how to go quicker through it. So thank you very much.
You could thank that team to your right.
Yeah, and thank you for the compliment on that.
Is there anyone else that wishes to comment? Good morning, Brad.
Brad Bernauer, Director of Human Services. Human Services, as you know, basically handles all the basic needs of the population. We have the housing, rent, utilities, food, to keep people alive. We also deal with the children's services. So since Beverly's not going to speak for Children's Services today, which I thought she was going to. I would like to point out that Children's Services is a basic need for the county. It handles the funding of programs for the children. And again, they are, as everybody knows, the basis for our future for this county. And we have made significant cuts over the years, anticipating making some cuts this year as a contribution to everything else, but we would ask that you would be gentle with us. I have to thank Jason and Joe from the Human Service Department perspective. They have told me to keep making cuts, but without touching any services whatsoever to the public. And we've been able to do that thus far. Hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that with minor cuts, if any are necessary at all. We've got it down to the bare minimum, but we're operating with a staff of 1 for all of those. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Good morning.
Morning, Commissioners. Joe Paladin. Listen, I hear that on the street quite a bit, relating back to what this gentleman stated. I'm addressing the question to you, Mr. Chairman. Are you commissioners allowed or permitted to cut your salaries?
I know our salaries are set by a formula from the state, and it's based upon inflation and the population of the county. I know you'd have to get Tallahassee to change that. What I've done the last 2 years is each year in October they adjust the salary based upon that formula, and I've taken the difference in my take-home from that adjustment and do a payroll contribution and give that back to the United Way as a way of giving it back to the community. I believe Commissioner Solari participates in that way as well. To me, that was the easiest way to give back without having to go to Tallahassee and trying to change the bureaucracy up there. But as far as can we legally change it, I don't know.
I mean, does anybody know the answer to that? You can't. They have to get paid the salary, and it's in the state law. You have to cut a check to the commissioner. The commissioner, it's set by state law.
Okay, it's set by a state statute. I'm sitting here trying to find that statute right now, but I think the only way you could change it is if the statute itself was changed.
So going back to what Commissioner Solari said earlier, he wasn't asking anybody to do any more than what they were doing in their department. So if that was permissible, then I think Commissioner Solari would look into that and see if...
Well, actually, I did this, as I say, the same thing Commissioner O'Brien did, and not only that, but I increased our home giving by about 30%, recognizing the times we're in, and that was a commitment my wife and I made specifically because of the times we're in, which we will probably continue over the next years. And personally, I believe that's a better way to go. I would much rather have individuals direct their monies the way they want to towards, if it's service to the community or something else, than rather have the government take their taxes, which increase a further burden on everybody, and then have the government spend those monies.
And I agree with you, and I think it's only fair that the public should know what you do and that they know that, so that they know you're making those sacrifices.
Same as Commissioner O'Brien, I never see the increase. It's deducted immediately from the salary. I'm happy to do that. I'll commit to do that the next year and the year after that. But again, I still believe fundamentally that the best help we can do for our community is to keep taxes as low as we possibly can.
I agree with that, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience who would like to comment at this time? Okay. Joe, I think the board, we had consensus both on whatever mid-year cuts that the board makes, that we're going to ask all the other agencies to try to adjust their budget that same level in the mid-year cut. And I think we had consensus that going forward, we're going to ask all agencies to make a 9.9, 10% cut for next year's fiscal year. Does that concur with the board?
For next year's fiscal year. Also, that doesn't take away with the mid...
no, the mid, whatever we do in the mid, we're going to ask as well as next year 10%.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything, what else you need from us at this point in time?
We were going to send, I know that I met with, we were looking at asking, for a 15% reduction from everybody next year. I know that I met with the health department. We can ask for just 10. That'll be because we wanted to send the letters out this week so that everyone's aware for next year that we're going to look at a 10% cut. Some agencies have cut and some aren't. We may ask for more of a cut from those agencies that have never cut in the past, because I think that's fair, and we'll show a history of that. But and so that means we'll ask Child Services to cut 10%. You're saying as well, because I'm going to send that memo out today because they start their budget meetings, or Jason will, I should say.
Yeah.
But that's what we're asking for direction is. You're looking for 10% across the board.
And in addition to that, I know by statute we have a lot of the meeting times, but if there's a way of starting to lay out when we'd have our budget workshops. For several reasons. I know there's some vacations coming up that people would like to plan around, but more importantly, to let the public know as far in advance when we're going to have the workshop and the debate and the decisions made on the budget.
Yeah, we'll have that on. In fact, we had the board vote on that a couple of weeks ago, so we'll put it on our website and we'll send it out. It will go out with the instructions and everything.
And I'd actually like to thank the members of the public who are here today.
Yeah.
You can all stand up as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I applaud you for coming. I mean, this isn't always the most exciting thing, but as a commissioner, I'm happy to see you. And I actually wish this was the most crowded chamber that we had. And I wish that during the budget hearings that the chambers were full. I mean, I think that too often the public forgets that the budget process is extremely important to our community, and they just sit back and don't participate as much as they could or should in the process, hold our feet to the fire, understand what's happening, and then later on they complain about their taxes, which is natural. But I applaud you for coming. I hope to see you at all the rest of the budget hearings.
Commissioner Wheeler? I got to say it, but I think, and I appreciate everybody being here too, but I know I served on this commission before Save Our Homes went into effect, and when we had the budget hearings and we looked at tax increases, people were here, after the trim notice went out, people were here in full form because their taxes were being affected. Since 1995, when Save Our Homes went into effect and that constitutional amendment, residential properties have had a shield, and all the non-homesteaded properties have picked up a disproportionate share of the tax burden in this state. And that's when after that, at the budget hearings, we would have Jim Granzi, Bob Johnson, and Frank Coffey, and they were about the only citizens here that weren't here looking to increase the budget, but they were here to decrease the budget. And there were some others, like the Taxpayers Association, and so on and so forth. But with Save Our Homes and what the state did and what happened then, and the voters also, it really changed the way business was done tax-wise in tax season.
Okay. Jason, Joe, do you need anything further from us at this point?
No, I'd just like to say, from my memory, I think the budget workshops are scheduled for July 21st and 22nd. That's a Wednesday and Thursday, because there was a question about the dates.
I think you're right.
Okay, and we'll confirm that. Anything from the commissioners to wrap up or summarize? Okay, I also want to thank everybody for coming and attending today, and with that, we stand adjourned.